Hi, welcome to Connecting with Players with Disabilities. I am Emilio Geldres, Senior UX Designer, and I am leading accessibility initiatives at King. I have worked in Candy Crush Friends Saga, but I'm currently leading UX in Farm Hero Saga. At King, we have 240 million active users as of Q4 2020, and it's important for us to connect with all of them and create a consistent and enjoyable experience for everyone. So I'm gonna talk about the accessibility menu in Candy Crush Friends Saga, which was done by Ed, Michael, Steven, and myself. And this is the first time there is accessibility menu in a King game, and we have to manage and I'm gonna talk about the process we did and the challenges and the results of it. And as you can see, we have the accessibility button at the beginning in the home screen. So the first thing that every player open the games will see was this button. And we will see the results of that too in a couple of slides. So how everything started, it was in when the Global Accessibility Awareness Day was coming last year. So it was in May last year. So we start asking in the community to our players what type of accessibility feedback do they have for us. And we have the first thread was not really successful. All players didn't really know what was accessibility, and they were given different type of feedback, but it was not really useful for us, was not actionable. So we reframe it and we put it like give an example what kind of things we were looking for, and trying to frame it in what is the visual, auditory, cognitive, physical, and general type of feedback, and think that it can give us more insights. And the feedback was super good. And at the end, what I did is creating a backlog with all this feedback. In this example, was related to the particles and where these particles were present and where the problem the player will have in with this. And the reference of the particles or video. So we have this for all the different type of feedback. And then the comments player were saying about this. And then we have to wait until we have our first hack day when we could do something on this. So we have one day when we could do whatever we want to improve our game. And so I partnered with Ed, who is the dev, and work together to start working on this and try to like how we can tackle all this feedback, and what was the best way to to use one day to work on this. So the first thing, since the particle was super popular around our players, that was the first feature we work on. And and at the same time, it's like, okay, we have also a lot of other options that we cannot do now, but even if this is one option now, we will need, a space for this. And the current settings menu didn't have a lot of space for it, all these options. So it's like, okay, we are going to need a special place for all these options. So that was pretty much what we did. So I work on the flows and, how we're going to work on this. And then Ed pretty much did all the hard work, but then was super empty for this and only have two options. And the second was pretty much just enabling all these little things, assets to tell the toggles are on and off. But then we have a lot of empty space, so it's like, okay, what else can we put here? And I thought that it's like, since the community feedback was so good, maybe we should add just an email so they can send us more feedback. And create this. We create this accessibility at King email, and it was like the three of us had access. So it was Juliet, Ed, and myself. And the idea with this, it was like players tap on it and it will have already automatically filled the to and the subject. So it will send the email to accessibility@king.com, and we'll have the subject around accessibility feedback. And the idea with all this is like, was like the player will press the button, will open the native app with all this pre-filled data. We will receive this email, and an automatic email will be sent to the player. And then this feedback will be communicated to the game team, and then prioritized and put it on the backlog. And then at some point, the team will be implement this feedback in the game, and the game will be updated with the release notes. At the same time, the players we will send another email to the player asking for more feedback if needed, and if she would like to be contacted for more detailed questions. So the player will receive this, will fill this form, and to be contacted by the studio, and then we will go to player research. We were also checking that all this form and all this process need to be accessible to. But then when the player did the research, all that feedback will go again to the team, so we can, continue improving all the game and making it more accessible to all our players. But at this point, this like, okay, let's check if this is feasible, and check with legal, and legal was concerned about GDPR. We couldn't, store all this data for so long. So it's like, okay, how we don't know anything about this. Maybe we should, partner with people who knows about this, and that was player support. Since they already they manage all already player feedback and player communications. And since also, so it was that the logistics and the scalability of all this, we didn't know how much feedback player will send, and we already have 100% of our time allocated to to the game. So just looking at the feedback, replying emails, and all that was over our scope. So we decide to change this to having in-game using the current form we have in the help center. And creating a category specifically for accessibility. Player support at the same time was concerned that having a contact button in the game is so visible will increase a lot of the reporting, player reporting different stuff, and will not use it just for accessibility. We'll use it for every purpose. And they were right. But we just needed there. I just needed, even if it's gonna be a small percentage of player feedback around accessibility, I thought it will be important for this player to have it there. So we fight for it, and that's why it's still there. So in the second hack day, we have Mihail also helping us with the UI. So now was like having like a proper part of the game and not just with placeholder assets. We changed the mail to, we add more, add a lot of more options to the menu. And now we were like looking more fill and like more like a full menu. So we have like the four options, and we still have the particles that will reduce the particles effects, but also reducing the screen shake. That also was reported by players, and the camera scrolling that we never thought, but is at the end of every chapter, there is a little camera pan going through a portal, a vortex portal, and that animation for some players have some motion sickness, some vertigo. This player had vertigo, and that was no good, so they can disable that. And the other one was disable the hints, and that's another topic we're going to talk later. But hints is just the movement, like when the game is suggesting a move. So it's like, oh, move these three ones and do this match. But a lot of players thought it was the tutorials. And we're going to talk about that later. So at the end, this is the final flaw we have currently in the game. So player press the button, they will open this form that is, they have the category now without accessibility. We receive the feedback. This feedback is communicated to the team, prioritized and put in the backlog, and they will work implemented in the game, and then, release, having the release notes. And this is, as you can see now, we have this subtopic just focus on accessibility. So let's see some data. So this is like how many players are opening the accessibility menu each day. And this is from the game. This feature was released at the end of September until today. And even obviously it was a big peak at the beginning. We have it's a permanent 1.5% of players open this 1% over 1%, and so it's interesting that just having, I think, is about the visibility of this button in the home screen, that have this continuous permanent like 1% over 1% of DAO. Also, after how many players after trying these settings is still keeping enabled. So this is the 100%, like how many players are has opt in the different options, and at the end how many of them is still haven't enabled, so still using these options. So even we have over 60% of these players are still using this. And I say before, you can see that with the biggest drop is the hints, because a lot of these players thought it was the tutorials turning off, and it's not. Um, so yeah, as you can see, it's still big, and a lot of players are still using these features, and it's still helping some players. So also, this is how many players are enabling. So it's 3%, the biggest. This is daily. So 3% of players every day are using this feature. And then the lowest is the particle effect with 2.2%. And how many settings do player have enabled? And this was interesting. Are players just using one specific setting, or are using all of them? And as you can see, 2 or 3 is super low, but one specific setting and 4 are like the most common. Uh, just to continue, this is just also daily. So you have every day 3.5% players just using one, and 2.8 using all of them. And then it's like, okay, what is the feedback we are receiving? And this is the platform we look the feedback. This is Looker. And as you can see now, we have the accessibility subtopic. So we receive plenty of data and feedback from players, but it's mostly feel in these 5 buckets, and which is obviously the feedback we were looking, that is feedback about accessibility feature, asking for new features, talking about the feature we had. But then we have also one bucket that is players confused with hints versus tutorials, like this specific feature is not working, this toggle I can still continue seeing these tutorials. And so and it's not exactly like this is, we need some work here. And then there is about accessibility misconception, that a lot of players start complaining why there is accessibility button on their game, like there is like, I have no disabilities, why disappear in my game, how I turn it off. So there is also some work to do there about like this misconception that accessibility is for just disabled players, and it could be is for everyone. This is something that it could help you too, and it's not something bad. And then we have, and some of this also is the signing issues. There is a lot of reported signing issues in this accessibility. It could be related to the access and accessibility have, super close in the wording, and they cannot access the game. But at the same time, as I said before, this is on the home screen. So at the same time, you have 3 options there: the play, the sign in, and this menu with the contact form. So a lot of players who cannot sign in go here and contact about, yeah, I cannot get into the game. And then we have other feedback. And as you can see here, other feedback was almost 70%, which is a lot. Then you have almost 20% who is signing. And we have 8%, which is like just giving good insights about accessibility. 2%, which is about like, this feature is not working about the hints. And then 3% just, saying that why do they have this accessibility feature here? They don't want it. Um, so it's still good numbers, and still we're gonna keep it there because those insights are super good. And the last iteration we did was the UX writer helped us to reframe this and make it more clear for players in a language. For example, particles is something we know what it is in development side, but for players it's just flashing. So for example, that's one of the changes we do. So it's remove in-game flashing. And then the stop end of episode animation instead of the reduced camera scrolling was not really clear, and don't show move hints. Um, so it's the movement of the the scan that you have to do, and also we shortened the title to just accessibility. And so as a conclusion, I will say connect with player initiatives, understand player barriers, go to your communities and ask your players, what barriers are you currently having in your game? And they will receive super good insights. Always check with your legal team, play safe, make sure you are playing by the rules, and they will help you a lot of things that you don't know about. Also, track everything. Don't miss the opportunity to understand your player behavior. Data will be your best friend when also, making decisions later. So that will be super helpful for you. And last, this is a multidisciplinary work, so partner with different crafts and different departments, and it's going to be super good for everyone be involved in these accessibility initiatives. Thank you so much.